unplanned occasions involving amateurs under pressure, well, everything never goes right. The central figure in this drama is the mother of the bride, the MOTB. Not the bride and groom or minister, mother. Usually an intelligent, polite, and sane human being, Mother was mentally unhinged by the announcement of her daughter's betrothal. Not that she was unhappy, as is usually the case. To the contrary, she was overcome with joy, and just about succeeded in overcoming everyone else with her joy. Nobody knew it, but this woman had been waiting with a script for a production that would have met with Cecil B. DeMille's approval. A royal wedding fit for a princess bride. The father of the bride began to pray for an elopement. She had 7 months to work, and no detail was left to chance or human error. Everything that could have been engraved was engraved. There were teas and showers and dinners. An 18-piece brass and wind ensemble was engaged. The bridesmaids' dresses were made to order, and the tuxedos for the groom and his men were bought. Not rented, mind you, bought. And if that wasn't enough, the ring was returned to the jeweler for a larger stone. Quietly subsidized by the mighty MOTB. When I say this woman became unhinged, I mean unhinged. The juggernaut of fate rolled down the road as the final hour came. Guests in formal attire packed the church, and enough candles were lit to bring daylight back to the evening. I believe they were. And from the orchestra pit, the choir gushed great music. And the mighty MOTB coasted down the aisle with the grandeur of an opera diva at a premiere performance. Never did the mother of the bride take her seat with such satisfaction. She had done it. She glowed, beamed, smiled, and sighed. The music softened, and count them, 9 chiffon-draped bridesmaids lockstep down the aisles while the groomsmen marched into place. And finally, from the orchestra pit, the wedding march thundered. Here comes the bride, preceded by 4 enthusiastic mini princess flower girls, chunky flower petals, and 2 munchkin ring bearers, 1 for each ring. The congregation rose in anticipation. Ah, the bride! She had been dressed for hours, if not days. No adrenaline was left in her body. Now, left with her father in the reception hall of the church while the maiden's march went on and on, she absentmindedly sampled some of the little pink and yellow and green mints, some grapes, a cheese ball or 2, some black olives, and a cracker piled high with liver pate. And to wash that all down, a glass of pink champagne. Her father gave it to her to calm her nerves. Now, what you noticed as the bride stands in the doorway was not her dress, but her face. White, for what was coming down the aisle was a living grenade with the pin pulled out. The bride grew up just as she passed by her mother. And by grew up, I don't mean a polite little lady like herb in her handkerchief. She puked. There's just no nice word for it. Hitting 2 bridesmaids, the groom, a ring bearer, and the minister. I'm quite sure of the details. We have it all on camera. 3 tapes worth. The mother of the bride had thought of everything. Now, having disgorged her hors d'oeuvre, champagne, and the last of her dignity, the bride went limp in her father's arms. Her groom sat down when he was standing, too stunned to function, and the mother of the bride groaned, slumped over, and passed out cold. Now, there was a fire drill then and there at the front of the church that only the Marx brothers could have topped. Groomsmen rushed about heroically, mini princess flower girls squalled, bridesmaids sobbed, and people with weak stomachs headed for the exits. And the smell of fresh wretch drifted across the church. Now, only 2 people were seen smiling at the scene of this accident. One was the father of the bride, and the other was the mother of the groom. What happened next? Well, all the guests were invited to adjourn in the reception hall. They didn't eat and drink as much as they would have in different circumstances. The bride was consoled, cleaned up a bit, and fitted into a bridesmaid's dress. And she was hugged and kissed a lot by her groom. She'll always love him for that. When he said for better or worse, well, he really meant it. And so the cast was reassembled, and a single that's not the end of the story. You see, 10 years later, on the anniversary of this disastrous affair, a party was held. Best friends invited, a feast was laid, and 3 TV sets were mustered. Remember, there were three cameras at the scene of this accident. And when all 3 tapes are played at once, the running commentary and stop-action stuff is pretty interesting. The part that got all the toasts and cheers was when the camera focused on the face of the father of the bride as he contemplates his wife being revived. Now, I really like this part of the story, not because of the party, but because of who organized it. Of course, the infamous MOTB. Mother's a lot looser these days, but she not only forgave herself and everyone else involved in the debacle, but she also forgave herself. And no one else laughed harder at the videotapes than she. There's a word for what she has, grace. And that's why the same grinning man has been married to her for 40 years, and why her daughter loves her still.